It's Don Hart, Vice President Training and Development at IDC World Source, and I want to welcome you today to our Living Benefits panel. We've got some real experts in the business today, two from outside of IDC World Source and two with IDC World Source. So I'm first going to introduce our outside speakers. Gary Steen is with Manulife. He's the Regional Marketing Director with Manulife. He'll start off his presentation today with a short presentation about the advantages of the Manulife product. After that, we'll have a presentation from Jonathan Lee, who is with RBC. He's the Senior Sales Consultant with RBC out west. And Emily joins us as the IDC representative from here, located in the beautiful prairies, and she's from the Prairie region, and she looks after our advisors in the Prairie region. Business Development Executive Emily Sorensen. And of course, Dave Pike is our resident expert on disability insurance and living benefits. Comes to us from Ontario. So we've got a cross-Canada representation with IDC. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this. I'll hand it over to Gary now, and Gary's going to share a presentation about the hotspots and advantages of living benefits with Manulife.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the Manulife Living Benefits portfolio. And just as a bit of a background, I am a specialist on the insurance side, life and LB for Alberta. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our product. First off, I'm going to talk about Manulife's long-term care critical illness program called LifeCheck. And sometimes when we talk about these programs, clients say things like, "Oh, that's so expensive," and stuff like that. I hate those words, by the way. I like to emphasize how you get paid. So the Manulife long-term care critical illness program LifeCheck has an early intervention benefit that pays 25% of the face amount to a max of $50,000 for certain defined early stage conditions. Those conditions don't reduce the covered condition benefit, in other words, the total benefit in the contract, or any return of premium benefits also in the contract. We have the covered condition benefit, which we're all used to in critical illness programs, heart attack, cancer, stroke, and 21 other conditions with Manulife that pay out the entire contract. We have return of premium benefits in this contract, return of premium on death, return of premium on early surrender after 15 years or any year thereafter, return of premium on expiry on certain contracts. And we also have a long-term care benefit as well. And that pays a monthly benefit if a client is unable to perform 2 activities of daily living, even temporarily, for a period of 90 days or more. Our disability programs, we have a number of different disability programs, but when it comes to the personal DI programs, we have 2, ProGuard and Venture. ProGuard is designed for primarily professionals. It is a very robust program. Think of it as a buffet at a restaurant. You walk in the restaurant, you pay one fee or one price, you get access to all kinds of stuff. It's really only if you want those really expensive extras like the lobster or the champagne that you might pay a little bit more. So it's a really good package program. Venture is designed for everyone. It is more like a restaurant menu. You pick your items and you pay the prices based on those items. Both are excellent programs. ProGuard, as I said, designed for professionals. One of the features in ProGuard is we have both residual and partial disability definitions that are built into it. And a client has the ability within a 12-month period to switch from one to the other to take advantage of the definitions that make the most sense to that client. In the Venture program, that program designed for everyone, if a client is an occupation class 2A or less, oftentimes the ones we call the ones that end the day with dirt under their fingernails, and those clients have a workers' compensation or an automobile insurance claim, our integration is the most liberal in the industry. What I mean by that is integration means that if you receive outside benefits, it reduces your disability benefit payout from your individual coverage. We have a minimum 40% payout on our individual Venture program, so that if that, say, WCB claim is more than 40% or reduces your benefit more than 40% of what you were originally covered for, we still pay at least 40. It's very powerful, very attractive. Both have what's called 4-back. So that is 50% of all premium can be refunded every 8 years based on low or no claims. And so that's an option in those contracts. We also have a program called Synergy. Synergy is actually a 3-in-1 program. It is designed as a very affordable multi-type coverage. It's got life insurance, critical illness coverage and disability coverage all in one program, all at one price. Think of it as something that's a better than normal mortgage coverage, but that's not the only thing it's used for. As far as sales tips are concerned, number one, I'd say, what plan makes the most sense? We have 6 different plans, 6 different pricings. They all cover the same stuff. So it's a question of what you're trying to do. You can layer those coverages. So you can have a layer of permanent coverage, for instance, that runs to age 100 with a layer of temporary coverage that runs a shorter period to meet a client's financial goal. Definitions are medically accurate. So one of the things we hear from people is, well, I don't like that because it has this definition. What does that mean? Well, it means a lot to a doctor. It means they can say yes or no. It means a lot to a claims specialist. They can say yes or no. You want clarity on your coverages. For disability coverage, I'd say number one, prepare your client for some disappointment in underwriting. Underwriting has a reputation, especially with disability coverage, of not always being able to offer exactly what you wanted. So think of it this way, frame your application as an offer for coverage. And Manulife will come back with our best offer. Our best offer might be exactly what you applied for. It might be a little bit less coverage, might be at a different occupation class. There might be an exclusion or a limitation, but get your client's agreement that whatever we come back with is worth looking at. Don't think it's all or none, because that's not the way you should approach this. And critical illness coverage could be a backup for your disability coverage if perhaps it doesn't quite hit the target. Incorporated clients can get DI. We hear this all the time. My client takes dividends. They can't get coverage. You know what? Revenue Canada says dividends are not earned income. Insurance carriers don't say that. We say, where does your income come from? How does it relate to your effort? If it relates to your effort, it should be covered. Show it relates to your effort. Doesn't matter how you get paid, salary or dividends. And the last one is if you have a client who's got group coverage, you can offer better coverage for that client. Individual, well-controlled coverage. They change jobs, they've still got that coverage. You can integrate it with their group if you so desire. It creates a great backup or a great top-up to the program they already have. Most groups are 2 years regular occupation, and then they're any OC thereafter. You can do much better with individual coverage. So for the right client. And the last thing I'd say is a mindset thing. Having coverage is a good thing. A lot of times when we talk about living benefits, clients go, I don't want a critical illness, so therefore I don't want the coverage. I don't want disabilities, therefore I don't want the coverage. Having the coverage is a good thing because bad things do happen. And when they happen, you want to have good coverage. So think about how your mindset works when you're talking to your client about the living benefit options and opportunities that exist and open it up to them. Remember, having coverage is a good thing. You don't want the bad thing to happen, but if it does, you want to have coverage. Thank you.
Right now, though, we're going to switch to Jonathan, who's going to give us the high points of the RBC product portfolio. So Jonathan, you want to take over and go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you, Don. And I'll just load up my slide deck here. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Don, for having me on. So for those of you who aren't familiar with me, there's a lot of people on here from coast to coast. So my name is Jonathan Lee, and I'm the, as Don mentioned, senior sales consultant. I am based in Edmonton, Alberta. So I handle all of Northern Alberta and the Northwest Territories. So been in my little neck of the woods for 14 years. So today I'm just going to give you sort of a little bit of a snip of what we can do on the disability side. I'm really kind of quite excited about this conversation that we're going to have today, because it's really focused on not so much about the product, but how do we get our clients to think about disability? How do we get our clients to wrap around that, yes, this is something that I need to address within my financial plan. So what I'm going to do is just going to go through some of our product highlights, but just so you're aware, RBC Insurance has 10 different disability contracts. 5 are income protection products, 1 is a retirement protector, and then we also have 4 business products. So I'm just going to show you some of our, again, we're going to give you a little bit of a taste of some of the programs that we have here at RBC Insurance. And obviously I handle my little neck of the woods, but I have colleagues throughout the country who can help you out with the rest there. So the first program that I do want to talk about is a special program called our Medical Student Offer. For those of you who are dealing with clients who are in medical school or in residency or who are in their first year of practice, particularly those in residency and in their first year of practice. We can get them a certain amount of coverage on our professional series contract, which would be very similar to Gary and the ProGuard contract. Slight differences, but more similar than different. But we're able to give this contract to these folks with a 25% discount. They have to pay the first month premium, but if they're a student, we actually waive 12 months of premium. If they're in residency, we waive the next 5 months of premium. So really good deal. I kind of make the joke as these students transition from eating Kraft macaroni and cheese to foie gras, they can bank some cash aside. We have another similar program. One thing also to mention on the medical student offer, again, we're able to get them that coverage non-financially and non-medically. And the second program we have is our engineering student offers. So for those students who are in a co-op program, we can also get them coverage up to certain limits, non-medically, 25% discount. In this case, we actually give an 8 months of waived premium. So unique offerings. So again, we don't really have to worry about the medical underwriting aspect. There are some gateway questions that we have to get through, but essentially if they can get through those gateway questions, boom, they're gonna have their contract. Another unique, if you will, I would call it a product, if you will, but a sales solution, if you will. And this is unique to RBC Insurance, but it's called Guaranteed Standard Issue, particularly for those of you who are working in the group marketplace, or perhaps you're looking to get into the group marketplace. It's a way for us to issue individual contracts using group rules and principles. So it's between an employer and 10 or more employees. That would be the minimum. And essentially, we're able to give everyone a certain amount of individual coverage without medical evidence. And one of the principles of group is that everyone participates. So again, everyone would participate, and we're going to give everyone a certain level of coverage, again, without medical underwriting. And we do that, again, using those group principles and that everyone participates. So unique program. If you have a case, you're going to have to reach out to your local RBC sales consultant, but we'd be happy to work with you on it, happy to do joint sales calls with you and such on that. Another one that a concept that I really like, and I wouldn't say it's so much of a sales concept, is really more of a taking advantage of a piece of tax code. We've kind of forgotten about this piece of tax code. If you go into Google and Google CRA wage loss replacement plan, you'll actually find a piece of tax code on the CRA website. But it's a way for us to group individual disability insurance policies, and it would have to be between an employer and 2 or more employees. But essentially, the company would own the policies. The company would pay the premium on the policies. And the company is actually able to write off 100% of the premium. It's 100% deduction. The only difference is at time of claim, the benefit would be taxable. But if you think about it, we're able to now pay for coverage with a corporate pre-tax dollar versus a personal after-tax dollar. This can be a particularly powerful strategy, particularly if we're looking to insure a group of executives where perhaps the group coverage is insufficient for them, that they're not able to get enough coverage, definitions aren't sufficient, and so forth. This can also be a great concept with small companies, in perhaps lieu of a full group benefit program, where perhaps a lot of the staff actually have coverage to their spouse, and really what they want to focus on is perhaps the disability and maybe some other ancillary benefits, but not the full package. And this can work quite well for some of those folks there. Now, the bit I'm really excited about today is, again, it's not so much about the product, but it's about having the conversation with your client. How do we get the juices flowing with the client to get them thinking about disability, about protecting their financial future? So we're going to get into this obviously today with Don, but I put up on your screen here some open-ended questions that you might want to consider asking your client when you're perhaps having that nap, or you're having that coffee at Starbucks or Tim Hortons, what have you. So again, I'll just sort of quickly go through them, and again, we'll probably get into them more as we go through our discussion here today. But I'm a big fan of open-ended questions because we want to get the juices flowing with our client. What plans do you have in place if you became disabled? What plans do you have in place if perhaps you had a health crisis, a health challenge? How would that impact your income? So again, we want to pull them along, and we can go through perhaps the rest of these questions as we go through. So if you want to take a screenshot, maybe do it right now. But these are some great questions that we can ask. Like again, tell me who is or may be dependent on your income both now or in the future. It's a great question, in particular for dealing with folks that are coming out of university, getting into practice. An individual's most valuable asset is ability to earn an income. Have you protected your income? So when you see there's a couple more questions there, and I've got a bit of a whole list here with me. So here are some of my colleagues across the country, more sort of the prairie region. So you see myself, I handle the north. My colleague Melanie down in Calgary handles southern Alberta. I've got Zanette Barna out of Winnipeg. She handles all of Saskatchewan and a little smidge of Ontario, sort of the Thunder Bay area there. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Don here, and we'll continue our discussion here.
Excellent. So I'm going to get, I'm just going to try and shut this down just a minute. Lisa, I'm going to get you to make us large screen here if you can, the panel, to look at that. I should mention as well that the Q&A and the chat room are both open, and we do have a couple of questions here. I'm going to start off with the two fellows that just presented. So Gary and Jonathan, I'm going to pose this question to you two folks, and then I've got a second follow-up question for Dave Pike coming up. Can you give some disability examples of when someone will get kicked off their group benefits at work, and why should they buy group offset?
It's a great question. Maybe I can answer that. In particular, when I'm looking at someone in more sort of a higher position within a company, who has a lot of responsibility within the company, or that could also be an owner, that type of thing. One of the challenges we find with these individuals is they have a tremendous amount of responsibility. They might not even be able to completely shut off. So it might even be a challenge for them even to go on claim to begin with on the group side. But we have things, and Gary would have this as well, partial residual. So we've got more paths to go on claim. Another challenge that we sometimes see is, again, when we get to those sort of higher level occupations or positions within a company, there's a little thing called tribal knowledge, and you see it more and more acutely as you go up these sort of hierarchies. Certain people know certain things within a company that no one else knows. And if I'm doing a joint call, I might ask one of the principals or one of those people in power, how long would it be before you had to reach out to one of your disabled colleagues? The longest I've had is 2 weeks. Do you understand the implication of you reaching out to your colleague? At best, you might have put their claim in a gray zone. Because most group plans is based on total disability. It means you're completely gone from work. So that would be one example where you might run into some challenges with a traditional group LTD plan.
And Jonathan, you also mentioned about the new grad program. So I'm just going to capsule it by saying new grad programs. You specifically mentioned doctors and I think medical students, but are those new grad programs for more than just doctors? And can you mention some of the other occupations that are listed in the new grad?
Oh, absolutely. So physiotherapy, occupational therapy, accounting, MBA programs, lawyers, the list goes on. There's about 30 different occupations there, but typically we always give a discount. It generally ranges from 15 to 25%, depending on the program the person is in, and depending when they purchase the plan, we often give up to 5 months of waiver premium, but it is quite an expansive plan that we have now. Outside of our medical student offer and our ESO, those would all be subject to full medical evidence, but not financial evidence.
And the other thing was that it'd probably be listed in the brochure, though, right, for the new grad program, the occupations that it would cover. Someone specifically asked about engineers, but I think that any university graduate program would probably be covered in some form of disability insurance that you offer in terms of that new grad qualification. Dave, I got a question for you, David. It says, do you have group disability plan offerings for IDC advisors, especially guaranteed issue disability plan? Give us I know you're our IDC resident expert on GSI, but can you give us the lowdown? If I'm an advisor joining IDC today, can I get on the GSI program, or is that gone for the people who are already in the package?
So yeah, great question. It is something that, when we did that enrollment, I believe it was in 2015 is when it ran. And that was open for about a 90-day window, and then it closed. So it is closed now. So quick answer is no, it's not available for disability. We do have opportunities for group benefit programs for our advisors coast to coast that have been with IDC for over 12 months and have done a minimum of $10,000 of FYC. Would join you. So that would get you into your health benefits and what have you. We do have a critical illness offering as well that gets offered once a year, which I'm sure many of our advisors have taken advantage of too as well. That's an individual plan, but sold as a group offering. We are in the process, though, of in discussions to revisit the idea of an open enrollment for the GSI program again. That will likely not happen this year. That's probably going to be a 2022 plan if I was to just,
Don't go on a limb. Careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're looking at that, and all options are on the table. We're taking a look at what ones make more sense for the advisor and for the affordability for everybody, but for the companies as well to participate in that offer.
Right.
The one thing about that offer is that you kind of are fighting anti-selection because it is a guaranteed offer. So there's when you initialize the program, whether it be for an employer or for a group like we have at IDC,
Right.
you get the good with the bad if you're the carrier in this case RBC.
Right.
But that's the chance that you take. The other question I would have for you is that I got a note the other day. As a matter of fact, my last birthday, because I turned 66, and my note was, do you want to continue on the program? So how long does am I automatically out at 65, or how long can I stay in the program?
No, so 65 is what the maximum benefit age is to. If the individual would like to continue with the coverage, they can of course continue to pay their premiums for that, and that will no changes will be made to it from that side of things. After age 65, and Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but from 65 to 70 is a 2-year benefit, and then I believe to 75, and then if they get past 75, it goes into a 1-year benefit for that. But as long as they want to continue to pay their premiums, they can continue to have benefit. Of course, providing that they don't, convert into, which, I know we're probably going to talk about this too as well, but the conversion into long-term care, which also is an option for them between 55 and 65 as well.
So Jonathan, I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'll go to you, Gary. But the question is that a lot of times we talk about guaranteed renewable to age 65. And I think advisors get the feeling that the disability coverage in general, stops at age 65. And we on the panel know that's not necessarily true. It's renewable after age 65. What's the process at 65 if I'm a doctor or I'm in practice, I'm an insurance agent, the average age is 58, I'm going to work beyond 65 and I want to keep my individual plan going. What happens? What's the process?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. We basically send a little letter out saying, do you plan on continuing working? And our requirement is 30 hours. And Dave is right. Yes, it's based on a total disability definition only at that point. And again, maximum benefit period would be 2 years. Post 75, it goes to 12 months. But one of the things, maybe I would even backtrack that if we're having the conversation, if you, the advisors, having the conversation with the client, I think the bigger litmus test is based on their financial circumstances at the time. Maybe you're choosing to work beyond age 65, but can you even retire today? And if it's prior to age 65, then I know we're going to get into this. Maybe if the contract's with RBC, we might want to look at the options of converting that to long-term care insurance, because now it's going to be different. The way I look at long-term care insurance is it's really nothing more than a tool to prevent the unnecessary erosion of a client's assets due to the cost of care. So again, it's going to sort of change sort of the need, but that might be something to also consider.
Well, I think the other thing should be mentioned is that the premium is calculated on that 66-year-old person as well. Yeah. It's an actuarial calculation that it's not the same premium you were paying to 65. You folks would recalculate, okay, here's the premium now based on your age of 60, 66, 67, 68, right? So I'm going to go to you, Gary. I don't want to lose you here. You mentioned about the disability coverage and being part of a group. And one of the things that's happening today in the last few years is what we call the gig economy, where I might work for somebody for 2 years and decide, I don't like it here anymore, I'm going to go somewhere else. And And the young folks these days, they get mad one way or another, and they get bored, or they got to see the creative potentials not necessarily with that employer. They go off to the other one. When should I buy disability insurance if I'm in that gig economy, and why?
Well, I think the same as Jonathan, we would look at it and say, what are you doing right now, right? What is your occupation? Are you working 30 hours plus? What's your income level? So, I mean, I would say personally that it's as early as reasonably possible that the person can show a sustained income for a sustained period of time, right? So if somebody's just working part-time all the time, sorry, buddy. If somebody has been working for the same company for a while, or in the same occupation for a while, then we're on, right? So it really is a question of what's going to make sense at the time. I mean, claims are adjudicated based on what you are doing at the time that the claim is in, and we even have a non-occupational claim definition for a person who was, for instance, a doctor when they applied for coverage and then became a carpenter and then decided to do something else completely different. They're still covered under those things. So I mean, I would just say, if for anybody that you're working with, the question that from the insurance carrier is going to be, has there been stability, right? Has there been stability for a reasonable time? Are you working full time, close to full time under the definitions? And then let's talk. We're not talking. I mean, if we ask you one of the questions we ask, is, are you planning to change your work in the next period of time? If you say yes, we're having another conversation. So when you have stability, when you have earnings, when you've got that work in, that's the time to apply.
So not that anyone would do this, but the couple of wiggle rooms you have there are a sustained period of time. So what's considered sustained period of time?
Sure. Well, it's basically 30 hours plus for more than a year.
More than a year? Okay. So I graduate from school as a computer programmer, and I go join XYZ programming. And 2 years later, I'm thinking, I don't like it here. I apply for some disability insurance with you, thinking I'm going to start looking for a job. 6 months later, I change jobs. I go to the new place, and I put a lot of FIO on this thing. And then that would be considered okay?
Well, we could talk about what you actually said on your application at the time, but
Right.
yes. So generally speaking, I mean, one of the things that we think of is some people think it's your job, so it's your location. I work for ABC Corporation. I got to be working for ABC Corp. We say it's your occupation, right?
Right.
So if you're a computer programmer and you go from ABC to XYZ, you're still a computer programmer. So the only question is, are you doing the same things you did before? Or even more that way, and are you working the amount of hours, and what is your income? So,
Okay.
I mean, if somebody goes from being a computer programmer to herding llamas for a living and forgets to tell us they're doing that, at the time they apply, that 3 months later they're planning to quit and buy a llama farm, that could be a problem. But
So
somebody
you
who's
bring up another
really
good point.
changing.
You bring
What's
up, I
that?
mean, when I started in the business, I started selling disability insurance. That's how I got in it. And I did a lot of that, and I didn't have llama farmers. But I'll go back to that question in a little bit. I'm going to go to Emily for a second, because Emily, you're a business development executive, nice title at IDC World Source. In the world of living benefits, what does that mean? I'm an advisor. I've got a client. I want to go talk about disability insurance. When do I get you engaged?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, only 10% of advisors are talking to their clients about disability insurance, right? So we can usually assume that a lot of the time you haven't discussed it with your client. You're not pretty familiar with it. It's a confusing product. A lot of people see it as expensive. There's all these hurdles to get over. So what I always tell people is that to get me involved as soon as possible. I'm here to help you quote it. I'm here to help you, do a needs analysis and bring it to your business development executive if you're not as familiar with selling disability insurance. So I like to be brought in pretty early. I'm pretty familiar with disability insurance, and so I understand the many facets that come involved in the process. But we can usually assume that, considering only 10% are talking to their clients about it, that you might be new at it as well. So we encourage to hold your hand during the first few months.
Yeah, we'll get into that actually in more depth, as well as to why there's only 10% of advisors that are talking to their. I think you're You're a successful disability insurance salesperson if you've sold 4 or more in the course of a year. Because the advisors, for many reasons, which we'll get into as to why they don't sell it. I'm glad you brought up that needs analysis, though. I happen to have my old Canada Life disability needs analysis that I brought around to all my clients when I was selling it. And it goes through a few questions that are pretty interesting in terms about the statistics of the chances of becoming disabled. Then it goes into, I should probably have this on the form, the opportunity, the income that will be lost as a result of, my disability. And I know both these companies have a great fact-finding tool like this. Can you tell us, Gary, a little bit about the fact-finding tools that you have at Manulife with regard to disability insurance?
Sure. Thanks, Don. Actually, one of the best places to go these days is to Insure Right. So there's a site called insureright.ca, and it's a Manulife branded site, but it's not I'd say overtly Manulife in some ways. It's more of an educational site in some ways, and it's used by different people in different ways. So we've had prospects that have found it, right? They've Googled and they go, well, how much coverage should I have? And it's one of the sites that comes up. So insureright.ca does a probability calculation for you. So Don, you mentioned the Canada Life one has some statistics on likelihood of disability. Our site, based on age, gender, and smoking status, will calculate your percentage chances of having a disability longer than 90 days before age 65, a critical illness, heart attack, cancer, stroke before age 65, or dying before age 65. And it'll give individual stats and then give you a combined sort of risk, if you will. So it's a way to engage a client in a discussion about what those risks look like and what they've done to identify them. The second part of that site is actually a needs analysis. So there's a calculator that calculates critical illness coverage, disability coverage, and life insurance coverage, and you can do just little bits. You can do one component of that. So that's oftentimes the one that I point at these days in a digital age.
And how about the RBC?
So similar to Don, to Gary, we don't have a site called Insure Right type thing, but we do have some PDF materials that would, give you the ability to, and sort of all of those stats that you showed earlier. So I won't sort of rehash that, but one of the questions I found pretty powerful, because I do joint calls. I am licensed for the purposes of joint field work, and one very simple question I've asked clients that, if you were to be disabled or hurt and off work, what percentage of your income would you need replaced? It's very telling because, you can go through all the calculation, but most people sort of have, I kind of want all of it. Well, we can't necessarily give you all of it, but we can give you a good chunk of it. So that's sometimes, it's not, the old KISS formula, right? Keep it simple. And I found that to be highly powerful. All of those tools are great as well, but again, I'm a big one for just trying to ask good questions and have meaningful conversations, and that seems to work quite powerfully.
So Jonathan, one of the things you mentioned again is another sore point in disability insurance where you said, I want all of it. And the higher income you earn, the less proportion you can actually get.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me the rationale behind that in that disability marketplace, because if I'm making $500,000 and I go see somebody who's making $500,000, say you should have disability insurance, I can't get them close to 2/3 of $500,000.
No, you can't. Now, if we run it on an after-tax basis, sort of net, we might be closer to, generally it's never going to go above 85%, but it might be down to like 60, or again, the higher the amount. Well, as you get it to those higher incomes, and we do see some staggeringly high incomes from time to time, there's an element to self-insurance there that perhaps someone with a lower income wouldn't necessarily have. So, perhaps your doctor who's earning $500,000 or $750,000, they should have some, some acorns set aside, if you will, to tide them over. Whereas perhaps someone earning a much more modest income wouldn't have. So they're going to need a much higher percentage of their income covered. So that's generally what we're looking at there. There's also an element of self-insurance, but there's also an element there that we're looking at is an incentive for people to get back to work. So that's part of the reason why we don't insure 100% of their income. We do need a little bit of an economic incentive for them to get back there, and so that's part of the reason there. So again, we don't cover 100% because we need a bit of a motivator for them to come back.
So Gary, on your product, is there an integration when I go to, I've forgotten the name now, it escapes me for a second. the life insurance, disability, and CI all in one package, Synergy.
And
If I buy a
synergy type
Synergy,
product.
if I buy the Synergy product and I buy RBC's DI or your DI, and I max out my DI coverage, is that a way to get more coverage in place that might be part of that Synergy product?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Our synergy program doesn't have an integration clause.
Right.
So it's the maximum amount of coverage is $2,500 a month, based on the percentage of coverage that you can get. So the maximum coverage in synergy is 500,000 for the package. That's 100. That's 500,000 for life insurance, 2,500 a month for disability coverage, 100 or 2,500 a month for disability, and 125,000 for CI coverage, all in one program. There's no integration clause in that package at all.
Okay, great, perfect. I'm going to change directions just for a second. Dave, we're always out promoting disability insurance, trying to get advisors to sell it. What have you been working on recently where an advisor has sold a disability insurance or a critical illness insurance policy?
And for, we've somehow stumbled into a bunch of different, individuals who are professionals, or certainly white collar at that, and higher incomes. We've been able to sort of, break down some of the disadvantages or flaws or shortcomings or whatever you want to call them about group benefits, and truly get them to understand exactly what their group benefit program offers. And for instance, an example, Jonathan and I, RBC, it was no secret that our group benefit program as employees was very low. And it's taxable and everything else. So we had to go off and get our own. And of course, we went and got group offsets, and for those reasons. But we've been sort of getting people, now especially more than ever, we've had more people exiting, professional spaces, working for someone else, going out onto their own, pitching to them the idea of having that portable coverage for them, getting past that 2-year regular OC into a 2-year regular OC into an, regular occupation at least to age 65. Getting them to understand that, Jonathan mentioned it, ask them what percentage of their income that they're able to actually live off of. And, no disrespect to any of these people, but, I know that the more money that you make, the more money you spend. At least that's how it works in my home. And I do know that, no disrespect to the person who I'm sitting across the table from, but, I don't even think you're living on 100% of your income. So even if I was to give you 100%, that's still not even enough, right? So, once we're able, I find that I'm trying to work with our advisors, like you mentioned at KISS, keep it simple or what have you. These are very simple conversations. Once we actually boil it down and crash test the plan and really get to, in a very quick way, simplified way, offering them some solutions. But, certainly the group offset, for whatever reason, that's something we've been working on a lot right now, putting a lot of applications through for those. But there's obviously, many different opportunities out there, whether you're self-employed, an employee, or what have you. I've spent my whole life on the living benefits side, and quite honestly, I find this whole, life insurance thing that you guys do way more complicated than the disability, in my opinion. It's just, use us. We are resources for you. Emily, myself, Jonathan, Gary, we're all here to really get you folks comfortable with approaching your clients and feeling comfortable and just having that conviction in your voice. Like it's important to me that you have this because this is probably one of the most important things, discussions that we could potentially ever have with a client, in my opinion.
Emily, Dave mentioned the approach and approaching our clients. What would you recommend to an advisor as an approach to use with your clients? Like that advisor sitting here watching and saying, this all sounds great, but how do I get my client engaged in the conversation about living benefits and specifically disability insurance?
We're just talking about group. I think group is a great place to start. I think it's less than, well, a few years ago it was around 44% or something of Canadians that were employed still had group benefits. So you can usually assume that half the people that you're meeting with probably don't have a group benefit package in place anymore. And considering the current state of our economy, that might be declining quite quickly. So you can usually assume that the person that's sitting across from you doesn't have anything in place. So I would ask for it. I would do the work for them. I would ask for their group benefit package and take it home, analyze it. It's a great value-added service. Every time I've done that, most people don't want to pass the prescriptions or the massages. So it's a great way to add to the conversation. So I recently did one for an accountant, and they thought that they were making an income of about $120,000 a year, and they thought that they had 10,000 coverage. So after I brought it home and did the analysis for the client, for the advisor, and they were actually making something like $4,300. So we're talking about percentage of your income that's actually insured, very low. And this was an accountant, a professional accountant, working for a very big firm. So it's quite interesting to go into those conversations. But don't feel discouraged by asking for the group benefit package during the needs analysis process. That would be a great approach.
Yeah, I think that most people, I mean, the first objection you always get, right, Dave, is that, or Emily, I've got disability insurance at work. That's the first objection. Or I'm covered under SIB, WCB. And once you ask for that benefits booklet, which they usually can't find right away, that takes a little bit of time as well. And then you analyze it, and usually there's a cap. It's like, I have LTD to $2,500, and then it's reduced after the $2,500 by 50% to a maximum of, you can't even calculate it. I mean, you have to be a math genius to calculate what the actual benefit would be for the employee. The employee gets it and says, yeah, you got LTD, great, I'm covered. Well, you're not really covered. Even for $60,000, you might be taking home less than 30 if you ever got disabled. And as you said, David, people are living on 60 who are making 60.
Yeah.
They're living on 65 who are making 60. Like, they're going into debt on that line of credit on their house because they just got to read the paper to calculate that one. So if they did lose their job or become disabled, I mean, it's pretty catastrophic as to what could happen as a result of a COVID incident that lasts more than 90 days and you're off work and you don't know why. I got a brother-in-law that's right now a police officer who's been off for a year and a half from a tick bite from deer hunting. It's crazy.
Well, I also think, like, going back on your Canada Life needs analysis that you had there, which I also had when I was there at one point, and the whole idea behind it is that you talk about building your foundation, right, with a financial plan. If you do not insure someone's income, how can you build on the rest of their foundation, of their financial plan, right? If their income is jeopardized in the future, and we're talking, 1 in 3 on average before the age of 65 will be off work for 90 days or more. If we're talking about securing their financial plan, we need to secure their income first, or else the life insurance, the investments, everything else that we put in place would be jeopardized.
Exactly. I'm going to go back up to you, Jonathan. I am going to go to the WSIB scenario. When I got in the business, again, that we could do a lot of opting out. As Dave pointed out, the owner of the automotive shop, who never went under a car for the last 10 years because he was supervising a shop of 6 mechanics or whatever, he was lumped in with that WSIB payment and didn't realize that what his coverage looked. He actually had group and WSIB and didn't know exactly what he had, so we analyzed the numbers. What's going on today? I can't opt these guys out of WSIB anymore. The government stepped in and said, that ticket's over. Now what?
Yeah, great comment about WSIB. So in my neck of the woods, it's WCB. You go to BC, it's WorkSafe, and they're all a bit of the same thing, different flavor. Unlike like employment insurance and CPP disability benefits, which are federally run, WCB is always provincial. So while that might be the case in Ontario, it's not the case in Alberta. So if you are a business owner, you can choose to opt out of WCB, and often we encourage them because they have better program. But that's not always the case. And so Emily would, and Gary would know this, being oil patch country, we deal with a lot of oil patch contractors, and typically for them to get onto site, they have to have some WCB. They don't care if it's minimal, but they have to have WCB just in order to get onto the Syncrude site or the SO site, what have you. So you can't always opt out of it, but there's always maximums on these plans. So we actually have a great guide on our website. It's called Government Disability Benefits, Your Guide to Government Disability Benefits, and we actually show what the maximums are. And it's staggering what you get province to province. One of the little towns I get to, it's a little small city, it's called Lloydminster. And if anyone's been to Lloydminster, you know, half of the town is in Alberta and half the town is in Saskatchewan. And Main Street is north to south. If you're on the west side of Main Street, you're in Alberta on the east side. But I kind of make a joke about this, but literally, if you were on the east side of Main Street and you got hurt at work, you might want to crawl across to Alberta and say, no, I got hurt in Alberta, because the difference is over 30,000 of maximum benefit. So again, there's deficiencies there. And getting back to WCB or WSIB, you're only covered while at work.
Right.
So if you think about that, you're really only covered a third of the day. And, you know, if you're not working the weekends, well, you're not covered on the weekends. And it has to be a work-related injury or illness. Again, getting back to my point, illnesses, well, that's probably not covered unless you can prove it was a workplace illness. You know, so you have some coverage, but it's a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit dicey, and it would be regular OC anyway, and then any OC after 2 years, right?
Yeah, just to jump in on WCB, I mean, one of the things I say to people that say I'm covered under WCB, I say, you know, tell me the definition of an accident. And they say, well, it's kind of like something you can't foresee. I said, but in your case, you foresee that if you got injured, it would be at work.
Right.
Right? And they go. So I will tell a very, very short story. So speaking of Lloydminster, so a friend of mine was saying that his son was working at Lloydminster at a heavy duty equipment area. They were, you know, redoing, working on heavy trucks and stuff like that. And so one day, one of the coworkers comes walking in, sprays his son down with hydraulic fluid, and throws a match on him, and then starts laughing. So he goes up in flames. They knock him down, put him out. He walked to the front area in the shop, smoking, literally, and they called an ambulance, took him in. The guy was charged with assault, and I think is currently serving a jail sentence. Applied with WCB. WCB said this wasn't an accident. It wasn't a workplace accident. We suggest you sue him.
Right. Yeah. Well, there you go. You want to
Good old Alberta.
sue the employer or somebody after that.
Well, maybe it was on the Saskatchewan side, though. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to switch topics for a second, just because, speaking of that, that's the great setup to this next question. You know, the elephant in the room has always been about the horror stories of underwriting. You know, I got a guy that's really interested in it. He says, go ahead, let's do it. And then I submit that case to underwriting. Now I'm thinking, based on the information I got today from Dave and from Emily, I'm going to run it through them first and see if there's anything that might be a red flag or a warning issue that I should deal with. And then what do I do with the case, Dave or Emily? I'm talking to you. I got a case I want to submit to underwriting. I give you a little perusal of it. Maybe you've got a comparative from one company or others, why I'm going to place it here or place it there. You package it all up. What do you do next? Send it off to the carrier.
I'll let Emily start. Ladies
Emily?
first.
Yeah. So as I think what the question is getting to is what should be my expectations as an advisor on the underwriting of a difficult product such as disability insurance. And I would think that compare it to a critical illness insurance policy and then add more to it. So the thing is that you've added extra components on mental health being underwritten, because that's definitely important when it comes to disability insurance. And then you've added financial component to it. So now you've added a few more extras to this application that the underwriter has to look at. And so you are looking at not only added time, but perhaps added cooperation on your end to provide the extra information that's needed. And so, it can be quite a bit longer than average life insurance application or critical illness insurance application. But I always like to remind people, sometimes the most difficult type of insurance to get is usually worth it. If you can get through the application process and get that policy in place, you know that you've gotten a policy that, might be of that standard, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that you're there to help us, whether it's you, Grabinder, or Anel, or yourselves, to help us couch that case to the fellows on the top of the screen here, in my case, the underwriting, Gary and Jonathan, because, well, not underwriting, but the marketing department. They're going to get that. And the difference between disability and even life insurance really is that the underwriter only sees what you give the underwriter to see. They're not in Lloydminster or wherever it happened to be. They don't know what house, the kind of house the person lives. How important is, in your mind, Dave, the covering letter on a disability insurance case in those scenarios, particularly where the income is a little bit negotiable? You know, there are some bump ups in expenses maybe, or there's a little bit of wiggle room in terms of average income over a couple of years. How
Right.
important is that cover letter to send along with that DI case?
Yeah, so important. It's so important that we give a picture, painting, whatever you want to call it, of that client. So that's the first thing that underwriter sees to get a true understanding. And unfortunately, right now, our underwriting departments are, super overwhelmed with so many different things, because of COVID and, new ways of accepting new businesses and what have you. So, we had a case this week, actually, where an individual had been in the business for like 12, 13 years for a company, advertising company, goes off, becomes self-employed, has secured contracts with the companies that have followed him, but he doesn't have 2 years worth of financials, right? So that's a perfect case where we have to be able to illustrate to the underwriter, maybe get letters from the contracts that he does have. Let's get as much financial information as we can that he has over the past 6 months. Let's look at the last 2 years of employment income that he had with that other company, since it is tied to the existing industry. It's so important that the first 30 seconds that underwriter has that file, I would say, is probably the most important 30 seconds of that client's life when they're looking at, well, not life, but, in terms of the life of that disability policy, to make sure that, we are framing them in the right way. Disability is a bit tricky. And I think that's one of the things that, kind of upsets a lot of advisors, is that there is so much more to think about, whether it be on the financial side or the medical side. And, why do you care that, my client, like Emily said, has, is on Prozac, right? Because the underwriter didn't care when we applied for life insurance a year ago. Why do you care now? It's like, well, we do, because obviously, claims experiences when it comes to mental illnesses is obviously on the rise with everything, and has been even before COVID. So, like we as living benefit people, on this page here, and certainly Emily and I ourselves, we are almost, I feel like an underwriter almost every day. It's weird when you go to a dinner party and somebody tells you the medication that they're on or the illness that they have, and you know exactly what that is, which is a little creepy, but hey, it's just because we work with these things on a daily basis. And but yeah, cover letter. I know some people think it's just old school, but underwriters love it. And I think you guys, Gary and Jonathan, you guys would probably agree with that, the best way that we can present that client right away immediately is always the best case. And on most of the applications too as well, if you don't want to do a cover letter, use the notes page, fill it up, give them everything that you have to help them make their decisions.
Yeah, if I could add to that and reinforce that, I think one of the things that we get in discussion, Jonathan's going to go, yeah. We get in discussion all the time with advisors that call us and go, okay, I've got this client, and you just know it's going to be interesting. The next part we'll tell you what's going on. And, they want to review the situation. They want to review the case. They're not sure why underwriting is asking for something, and they're having trouble with it. So the first thing I try to reinforce with an advisor is that an underwriter, that we only get paid. The company only gets paid if we can issue the case. Right. So the underwriter is asking questions to try to get the case done, to try to make an offer. Right. So there's questions that they don't understand. They need better answers to those questions. So around things like security of contracts, security of income, family history, health history. One of the things I often share with advisors is our claims information. And I'm sure Jonathan does the same thing, where we share our claims information. We publish on our website every year our critical illness historical claims and our disability historical claims. So you can actually see where the majority of claims come from. And no surprise, perhaps to Dave, psychiatric is number 1 or 2, right? So when people say, yeah, that's right. So when people say, well, why do they care? Well, here's why. The number 1 or number 2, we expect that, by the way, that on ours, it'll be the number 1 claim this year. We do expect stress, and it's the toughest to work with from a claims perspective, right? So we share that information all the time to remind people of that. It's going to be financial history, stability, health are the things we need to deal with, which is why I oftentimes urge advisors, think of this as applying for a contract where you're saying, this is what I would like to do. And the underwriter will look at it and go, yes, or not quite, but here's what we can do. It's called a counteroffer, right? In contract law, it's a counteroffer. You want a counteroffer. It's better than them going no.
Yeah, and the difficulty there is 2 things I think of when I'm having this conversation is, one is I've had lots of healthy clients apply for disability insurance who had football injuries in college or high school, who get an exclusion on their their left leg, their hip, or their shoulder, or dislocated sockets in their arms, and I'm going, well, how's it feel now? Are you having any problems with it? No. Well, it's been excluded, but you'll probably never have another problem with it. But it's one of those situations where you really look good on the outside, but in disability insurance, they're looking on the inside pretty thoroughly as well to see what might creep up or come out of the woodwork to haunt them later on a long-term claim or something. So it is an interesting animal, and that's why I left it to this point in the call. It is 2 o'clock. We have this meeting till 2:30 for a good reason. We're just scratching the surface, and this is what I was afraid of with disability insurance. It's such an interesting product, but again, as Emily pointed out, 10% of the advisors sell this stuff because there's a lot more to learn. There are some trips and traps to the product, and you've got to watch out for. Pre-existing conditions is horrendously one of those things that the fellows are referring to here now, and prior drug use or prior drug incidents, or people who have studied at university to be psychologists, they put them on antidepressants to get them through the school. So when you go and apply for the insurance, and they say, "Have you ever been prescribed an antidepressant?" and you go, "Well, yeah, I went through school to become a psychologist." I'm going, well, sorry, how long were you suffering? How long did you take it? Blah, blah, blah. So the cover letter is paramount to getting disability insurance placed properly and get that best offer from the underwriter. But how important are those letters, Jonathan and Gary, to the company? Like, do we just write them for fun, or are they actually reading these letters?
Well, maybe I'll just kind of quickly comment. No, our underwriters very much do like the cover letter. And I think Dave was, you were sort of describing it earlier. We don't know your client from a hole in the ground. So that letter gives a good picture of what's going on. And as we're sort of talking about perhaps mental health, maybe I'll sort of mention this. There's a difference with mental health, in terms of degrees. Like, was it more situational? Like did you go through a messy divorce or a sudden death in the family, and you got some help and some treatment and you got through it and you're fine? Or is it something more sort of chronic, like you've been dealing with long-term depression or things like that? We take a look at it differently. So particularly in the case where it's more sort of situational, give us the context of what went on there, and write that out. That's going to help the underwriter make their decisions. So no, please take the time. I know it takes about an extra 20, 30, maybe an hour of your time to draft a good cover letter, but it's worth it, because obviously a lot of advisors, they're concerned of, you are in business for yourself, and revenue is important. So if we can shorten the time frame from submission to your commission, so much the better. And that cover letter can really help with that. So get in the habit, particularly with DI policies, of writing a cover letter. It's worth its weight in gold for sure.
So having talked about all the incidents of disability and the probability of having a disability, we then have this little rider on our disability products that gives us the opportunity of getting our money back if we don't have a disability. How important is it to have a discussion about that return of premium on my disability insurance product? I'm going to go to Dave first to answer that. I know your eyes got wide there, Dave, but how often do you, and I know it's kind of a personal opinion sometimes.
Yeah.
But the math is there, but
Yeah.
What's your feeling on ROP on DI?
Well, I think for some, like, obviously there's many advisors who would never sell anything without it, right? If it's there, I'm selling it. obviously over the years, disability as critical illness too as well, the premiums have been increasing, and there's also been a number of changes that have been made to the products. Some of them used to be 100% and of ROP, and it was relatively affordable. Now, of course, it's 50% a lot of times, and not affordable, depending on what it is. And we also have, other things that we want to do for the client too as well. We're not only want to tackle the idea of disability, but we also want to give them some CI, because, there needs to be a bridge there, because my gosh, the disability that we're offering is a 90-day, which means that we don't start counting days until the 91st day, which means you don't get your first check until the 120th day. My God, so maybe we need to give you about 50,000, maybe a critical illness, just to maybe even 25, just to buff you over, to get you to the point where now we get into a routine. Geez, in case you die, we think you're not going to, because, the joke is we don't die anymore. We just get sick and just live, because of course, medical science has been able to continue to, increase the survival rates. But if you do, we also need some life insurance, because of course, everybody on this call, life insurance has been the foundation of all of the conversations that you've ever had with your clients. Like, disability very rarely is the first one. We feel, obviously everyone on this call feels that it probably should be the first conversation you have, but I think that for the right client, it fits. Obviously, if it's affordable, it fits. Many of the carriers have offerings to, get it back, not at expiry, but within shorter periods of time. And, some people may look at that as like a bit of a forced savings program. Chances 1 in 3 it's going to happen to me, but what if it's not? So I try not to imprint myself, obviously, on what's right and what's wrong, but I think at the end of the day, everything boils down to affordability. And, when you're doing your needs analysis, which is going to combine a whole bunch of different aspects of the plan. And if at the end of that, if return of premium fits still within that budget, I say fill your boots. It's a great offering, and for those people that have it. But I think that over the years, I've certainly seen a bit of a decline in the amount we quote them, but I don't necessarily. I think that once the affordability it boils down. And Gary, you might have a better, obviously your products have that. And, you guys probably are very big proponents of it and sell a ton of it, for the right client.
We'll get those stats in a second. I want to hear from Emily. Emily, your personal opinion or not on the ROP functionality of the policy.
I have to agree with Dave on most of that. I go about it a little bit differently. I don't usually start off ever with the conversation. I never assume someone's going to want the ROP. I sometimes usually introduce it if they don't find value in. A lot of people think that disability insurance is quite costly. So if they do, I talk about that if you don't use it, you get your money back component of it, right? So then I introduce the ROP portion at that point. And honestly, I think providing both options is a great way to go about it and presenting to your client and letting them decide. Do they see value in, this whole insuring themselves that they won't actually use the product? When a lot of our stats say that lots of people will actually claim on disability insurance, right? So, just provide the information. You have the availability to look at it and provide it and show it, but I usually don't start with the conversation.
Yeah, it's funny, the statistics. I mean, the statistics of a disability are 1 in 3. Right. So the statistics, though, of a class 4 disability at RBC or Manulife that have purchased it would be different statistics than the global overall statistics of everybody employed in Canada.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting. I always did what you did, Emily. I showed the client, you can have it this way or you can have it this way. If you go with ROP in 8 years and you get 4 years back, we put that money in your RRSP, and at your level of income, your refund is going to be equal to the amount of money that it actually cost you. So you've had 8 years. If you don't have a disability, you've had 8 years of disability insurance coverage for free. And now we've got it in your RSP. You can pick that one, or you can pick it like your car insurance, where you just never have an accident, you just paid your fee and we walk away. What are you finding, Gary, in the statistics of people who buy ROP versus don't buy ROP?
Well, I guess there's two parts. There's two parts. Okay, so on critical illness coverage, the vast majority of people select both the ROP on death and return of premium, usually on early surrender. We see
Right.
that generally across. It's more than 75% of all the sales. On disability, I haven't seen sort of the final stat, a definitive stat, but I would say it's maybe half, maybe
Mhm.
half. It depends. When we move up into ProGuard, the professionals, the 3As, the 4As, the 4Ss, the percentage becomes very high.
Mhm.
Uh, and oftentimes it becomes an argument between us and the other guy in the room over what's more important. But oftentimes on where pricing is important, then it becomes a question of value. And if the client doesn't see the value, then they don't do it. So I think that's where it comes down to. ROP is one of those things. We have some people that hate ROP. I'll say that right off the bat. Some of our internal people hate ROP. They say you're betting you won't get sick. So if you're betting you won't get sick, then why are you getting this coverage at all? And if you're getting this coverage, shouldn't you just get more coverage, right? So it becomes one of these funny kind of circular arguments. I look at it and say it's hedge. It's really a hedge, right? We're dealing with a lot of investment advisors. They understand hedging. You pay a little bit extra to get a little bit more. Is it worth it? We don't know
We
for
don't
sure
know.
today, but down the road, it may well be worth it. So
Yeah.
it becomes an exercise.
Again, I got it. I've been selling for a long time now, and I've been able to deliver those $25,000 and $30,000 refund checks to my clients
Yeah,
who are still healthy.
yeah.
And one guy was going to buy a sports car. He was about 55 when he got his check back, and he's like, "I just don't know where I'm going to get the $30,000 to buy this sports car." I go, "I got good news for you today, because today I'm bringing a check for $28,000. Your refund." They forget that they had the refund of premium policy, and they realize that, oh my God, my 10th year is here, and now I'm getting my check back. So it is a battle, though. It is, some people would say it's a disincentive. The competition, who now is no longer the competition, because the company that used to always say, well, we would never sell that because it's a disincentive to claim, was just bought by a company that sold tons of ROP, and I sold tons of it at that company. So now I'd like to hear the philosophical differences between those two camps. But anyway, some would say it's a
I think
disincentive to claim.
we look at it and say it really is a matter of personal choice.
Right.
And it becomes a matter of dollars and cents. And sometimes it's dollars and cents as in, do the dollars make sense to you, right?
Right.
If this makes sense, it's a great idea. I agree with it, by the way, Don. I've been in situations where I've had calls from clients because they've phoned their advisor, and their advisor goes, I don't even know what to say. And the client goes, I just got a check from Manulife for like $15,000 on my disability plan I bought. Does this mean it's canceled?
Right. Yeah.
And I go,
Yeah.
no, this
I've
is
got
the
that
return
call
of
too.
premium. This is right. And this is how it works. And they go, oh, that's good. And I go, yeah, that's good. Right. It's a hedge.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So one of the areas that's always challenging as well, and I want to know how you position this. I sold the disability insurance policy. It's been in force 5 years, and now I've got a claim. Me as the advisor, I sold it. I really supported the company in me selling it and buying that product from either of your companies. And I want to help my client through the claims process. What's your position on the involvement of the advisor during the claims process? Dave and Emily first, in terms of the paperwork, and then you two folks on the side of, now we've got the paperwork, what's happening? So Dave, what position do we take in terms of the advisor helping the client through the claims process?
Yeah. So okay, so this is a bit of a touchy subject, right? Because
Why ask it?
I've seen times where an advisor can completely muck it up. And at the end of the day, these claims adjudicators do what they do for a reason. I know what I don't know. And I'm very good at not knowing what I don't know. So, we can assist. What I generally, obviously we can assist with, directing it to claims departments. Emily and I obviously are fortunate enough to have relationships with many of the different carriers, including RBC and Manulife. So we can generally help to stick handle to make sure it gets into the proper hands, making sure, we can help. I would say maybe just coach this is the first time that the client has ever dealt with this in their life. And it's probably, I've been on the receiving end of going through a claims process as well with my family. And I'm in the industry and I was stressed out then. And this is what I do for a living. So I can only imagine how hard it is for the client. And also at the same time, we have to understand that this is probably the first time that the advisor has ever dealt with a claim scenario as well with a disability or a critical illness claim. So, I would say, the most involvement I would suggest that the advisor get in touch with is just, maybe get them the claims forms, being that connection person maybe with the carrier. But in terms of, at the end of the day, the claims conversation is not between the carrier and the advisor. It is strictly between the carrier and the client. And, let them go through their due diligence and processes and everything else. And, I say to, whenever we have a conversation with a client or with an advisor who is, feels that, that they're not going to pay. I can tell you, I've been in this industry now for 15 years and, certainly on the living benefit side for 15 years. And, you guys pay 100% of all legitimate claims every time. I've never, ever, ever had a situation where a carrier, any of the ones that we are affiliated with at IDC World Source, where there has ever been a situation where a legitimate claim was not paid. So, I don't know. That's just my opinion. I know that
Emily?
the other advisors like to have more involvement in it, but out of my experience, it just generally complicates things and maybe sets the expectation. If anything, it just sets the expectation with the client that maybe might be a teensy bit high because
Emily?
it does take time.
Dave, I'm going to throw it over to Emily.
Yep.
I think with most things, even outside of the living benefits or claim area, Dave and my role at IDC is that we're here to help the advisor, right? So we're someone to talk to and help navigate this world a bit. So like Dave said, we'll help point you in the right direction. We'll be there to talk about your concerns or your stresses, or, if there is something that comes up that you weren't expecting, we're someone to talk to for sure. But in regards to actually being an expert on the claim area, we're not going to pretend we are, but we're going to help you get the help that you need. And that's what we do in most situations.
Okay. So now we've got the paperwork. We helped the advisor fill out the paperwork, and he's gone off to his client, completed that. It gets to Manulife and RBC. Guys, how much involvement do you want to have at that point from the advisor's perspective?
I'll jump in first, and then Jonathan can correct me. When a claim comes in, say claim comes into Manulife. So the typical situation is someone calls Manulife claims. Now it could be the client. That's unusual. Normally it's the advisor or it's someone else that will call into Manulife. Manulife claims first question is, who do you want us to deal with? Do you want us to deal with you, or do you want us to deal direct with your client? So we're okay with either way. We probably have a preference, but we don't say what it is. We do find, especially on the living benefits side, sometimes things get really contentious. I will say that oftentimes, or sometimes that happens. But the advisor can add a lot of value, right? We do communicate directly with the advisor and update them on what's going on in the claim. It depends on how involved they would like to be. So if they'd like to be very involved, they can be very involved. If they want to be very hands-off and let us do our thing, we will just advise them of what's going on as the process is occurring. So it's a matter of how they define it. We do find that sometimes advisors getting involved directly helps, and sometimes it doesn't. Right? Sometimes they try to adjudicate the claim themselves, and then they imprint on the client their perceived frustrations and that sort of thing. So sometimes they can help us, and sometimes it doesn't help the situation. Sometimes I'm sure that that Jonathan and I have probably had this similar conversations with advisors who've gotten very heated over things because they don't think it's moving fast enough. But our job is to pay the claim. So we are going to pay 100% of legitimate claims. Statistically, again, I did mention on claims that we publish claim statistics on what types of claims we see. We also do publish an overall percentage of claims received versus paid. So typically on living benefit programs, it's about, say, between 10 and 15% of claims that we receive, we don't actually pay. The reason why is typically because it doesn't, whatever the situation is, doesn't meet the contractual requirements of that claim, or the waiting period wasn't satisfied. A very small percentage, someone forgot something really important during the underwriting process, got to tell us something they really did know. Very small percentage, but we also encourage people to put the claim in, right? If someone says, I think I might have a CI claim, we say, send it in, let's look at it. Let's look at the condition. If it's covered, we're paying. If it's not covered, your contract is still there, right? So a lot of those unpaid ones are not, they're not declines per se. They're really because it didn't meet contractual requirements, and it may in the future.
Yeah, and it doesn't null and void the contract. The contract continues
No.
on if the premiums are paid, so it's all good in terms of the next time something might happen that is a claimable expense. Jonathan, what's your feeling on the involvement of an advisor at the claims process?
Yeah, I would say sort of very similar to Gary. We allow the advisor to be involved, to a degree. Again, I've seen, similar to Gary, I've seen situations, and Dave mentioned, where the advisor involvement is really counterproductive. One thing I might want to mention on the claims side, and this particular is around sort of our clients who are more sort of in the kind of the white collar kind of executive level, is degrees of claim. So I'm sure Gary's probably had conversations around this where, we're having a conversation with an advisor and like, I don't know if this is a claim or not. And usually my next question is, well, tell me about what's going on. And basically what ends up being described is a reduction in duties because of the underlying health issue. Well, if you take a look at the definition of partial disability, it's under doctor's care and cannot perform one or more of the important duties, or now they have a loss of income, but they're still working. So they have under their mind that they have to be completely gone from work. Well, depending on the contract, there's multiple paths to go on claims. So that's another big thing around the claims process that I would mention. The other thing too is if it looks like it's going to be a claim, start the process as soon as you can. Proactively call our claims department. Let's get the ball rolling. You've all sort of mentioned this, so I'll reiterate it. It takes time to adjudicate these claims. We got to gather up all the information, your employment information, all this doctor's information, adjudicate the claim. It can take a while. So start the process early. Try and set those expectations. Just take a deep breath. It's going to take a while to get through this, but we will get through it. We just have to obviously verify the veracity of the claim. But again, in particular to those more nuanced claims where, again, the loss of time, duty, or income, again, let's get those claims going, because again, there's different ways to claim.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation again in itself. We don't have enough time today now. I was going to get into some definitions, and one of them being the partial versus residual, but I'm not going to do that. We've got a question here. What living benefit product seems to be easy on paying claims? Critical illness or disability insurance?
They're different.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a hard one to answer.
Well,
the one thing I will say about it is
I'm
really glad to hear your, sorry Gary, but I'm really glad to hear your feedback on the advisor's position in the claims paying part of the process, because back in the day, because you're a representative, the advisor is licensed with your company, and at the point of claim time, he's actually a representative of the company. So you don't want to say something that might jeopardize the company's position, but you're also an advocate for the client, because you sold them disability insurance saying it was going to pay. And so the advisor at that moment is in a very precarious position, particularly on critical illness, on breast cancer, in the situ, is it life-threatening? It's all of those things. And is it a debilitating disability? How bad is the person hurt, and how did it happen, and everything else? It becomes a very interesting position, and why it becomes sometimes probably adversarial, but I'm glad to hear that you let the advisors participate in that part of the process. On the which one's easier to claim, I think that's going to be, just dependent upon what it is and how it happened and those kinds of things, occupational class, whether it's regular OC, ONOC, and everything else. That could be another hour call. We'll save that for another day, because I want to finish this call up with I want to position a story for you and then see what you would have to say to an advisor. We've still got some advisors here participating. I want to meet a client. I'm going to Tim Hortons. The guy says, I got 15 minutes. I want to hear your favorite napkin talk for that 15-minute appointment at Tim Hortons, that I can have a conversation about disability insurance or critical illness insurance with that prospective client or current client at that Tim Hortons. And Jonathan, I'm going to go to you first. One sales idea that you like or have heard, have seen work at that Tim Hortons and that napkin talk, and you don't have 15 minutes, but I've got 15 minutes. What would that look like? You got 1 minute.
Okay, well, I'll be quick and to the point. Again, I wouldn't say so much like a presentation. It's more to engage in a good dialogue with the client, and that means asking good open-ended questions. So some of the ones I gave earlier, Mr. Client, what plans do you have in place in case you had a health crisis? You had a health issue that now is going to preclude or impact your ability to work. What plans have you put in place? And let the conversation flow from there. And again, what I'm always trying to do is pull people along. I'm not trying to push them. And again, if we can engage in that dialogue, we will get to the point where, yes, this is something that's important and it needs to be addressed.
Okay. Then I'll go to Emily for my next one. Emily?
I like stats. So I like open-ended questions too, but I like stats. So I always start off with, like your chances of living to age 65 is 86%. Your chances of claiming on a critical illness insurance policy is, I believe, 1 in 9. And your chances of claiming on a disability insurance policy is 1 in 3, depending on your age. But, the chances of you using one of these products, get significantly more when you get into the living benefit side of things. So let's talk about that first.
Okay. Dave, Pike?
Yeah, the great thing about these chats is that you really don't need to dig very deep, right? Like everybody has a story that's not very far removed from them, right? So generally what I like to do is tell me about how that worked out for that person, right? Were they self-employed? Yeah, they were. So did you ever ask them what it was like for them to go down to zero income because they had no benefits, right? So that sort of, the client will be able, I think for us just to sit there, if we just listen and just kind of ask the question and shut up, they typically tell us everything, but they have everything already flowing through their heads. They have the story, they have the mother, they have the sister, they have the wife, they have the whoever that's gone through it, or even possibly themselves who have gone through it before in the past. And also generally what I like to do is, which is, we don't like to get too far deep into presentations, but, one of the marketing pieces that Don, you pulled up at the very beginning was that unearned income potential chart, right? And, RBC and Manulife have excellent ones too as well. So, hey, Jeff, right?
Yeah, that's a great sales tool.
You make $60,000 a year, Jeff. You're 30 years of age. Good for you. Your unearned income potential based on that 3 or 5% or 2% average increase over the next period of time. If you were to become disabled today, Jeff, and stayed disabled all the way to age 65, how do you feel about the fact that you've now just left, $5.2 million on the table?
Dave, that's pretty good. It's actually 5.4. That was,
Is it?
you know your stuff. I just did I got the chart right here.
Come on. I'm blushing, but
okay. You are red. I think that's from the boat. That was pretty good. But that is a chart that you could easily bring to that coffee shop and say, what are you currently doing to protect that $5.4 million? And if you died tomorrow, what are you doing? Like Emily says, I need life insurance. I'm entitled to have 20 times my income. What have you got? And blah, blah, blah. Gary, let's finish this. Go ahead. Sorry, Emily, go ahead.
Dave's party trick is guessing people's income.
Yeah. And their age. I'm pretty good at that.
Gary, let's bring this thing home. What would you say?
I find that stories really help. So if I'm sitting across from someone, I especially if I haven't really talked about the living benefit side and I'm talking to an existing client, I may say something to them like, I wanted to sit down and just chat with you about something that happened to me. One of my other clients that I've been working with for years, this is what happened to them. And it could be the good news. This is what happened to them, but happily they had this and therefore they felt better about it, or they didn't have anything and I felt really bad. and I don't want that happening again. So I want to talk to you.
Great.
Now I've used that with in some situations, and it actually works really well because it sounds kind of like you're apologizing, and the client goes, "Okay, tell me more," right? So you want them to tell you, you want them to ask you questions. So I find that stories work really well. I always tell people, if you don't have a good supportive story, borrow one. But most of us do have stories, right? We know people where things have happened, whether it's that disability, whether it's that diagnosis that has changed the trajectory of their lives. And these programs, disability programs, critical illness programs, they don't get you better in health, but they may help you stay in your world financially. And one of the chief sources one of the chief reasons why people fail to recover from an illness or a condition is stress. And one of the major sources of stress is money. So I talked to an advisor one day and he said, I had a heart attack. I woke up in the hospital and we're talking to the doctor and he said, the doctor's going on and on. And I'm thinking, holy crap, what happens if I can't work anymore? Like I got the mortgage. And he said, I was just like running through my head and I'm looking, the doctor's talking and I am just like over there somewhere. And so I think it's a story. Tell a story.
All right. Well, on that note, I want to thank you all, Gary, Jonathan, and Emily, and Dave, for participating today. Excellent conversation. We've had lots of people throughout the whole hour and a half. So obviously there's a real need and audience for the products that we're talking about. So we'll probably do a follow-up session on some more of this very shortly. So again, thanks very much. Any final comments from anybody?
No.
Everybody's good?
Sell living benefits.
Yeah.
All right, sell living benefits. There's a good comment to finish on. Sell living benefits. If you haven't had the conversation with your clients, for sure, bring it up. There are lots of opportunities to have this conversation, whether it be living benefits and CI or a disability insurance policy, protecting your income, protecting your family, and protecting your health. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Don't forget the University Days coming up September 28th, 29th, and 30th. Look at the bulletin for information about that, and you can start registering soon. Have a great day.
Take care.